Welcome to News9 Mediaverse, and you are watching On Point. Supreme Court on Thursday declared electoral bonds unconstitutional. The court has asked State Bank of India to furnish data on the electoral bonds to the Election Commission of India. SC has asked the EC to publish it on its website. And this is our story On Point. Now, what will be the legal consequences? What about those who had donated money to the political parties, but at that point of time, they were working under the promise that their names will not be disclosed? So there are a lot of complex issues involved, but before that, let me take you through what the court has actually said, because court has made number of observations. Let me just go across and play those important graphics for you. So the court says, not only the method to curb the black money, it's not the method to curb the black money, there can be other methods. And court says that it is very important to understand that what this act has done. I'm saying what the Supreme Court of India had to say. And let's go through these graphics. And it says bonds undermine the participatory democracy. Now, for court to say that participatory democracy is a big statement. Let's go further. The political influence and donations are connected. Then, infringes on right to information. That's a very important part of the judgment, right to information. The right to privacy does not extend to contribution. A very important, because 2017 gave right to privacy an important legitimacy. SBI will furnish all details by March 6th and it will be given to Election Commission of India, and by 31st of March it will be all public. Everything will be public. Electoral bonds will not be issued. Now, when we talk about bonds, why did they come? The idea was to curb use of black money by parties. There was a cash which was in circulation. Cash was running the economy. The idea was to do away with unclean money. How do you ensure that the unclean money goes out? Earlier systems allowed cash to float around. This was through online. The banking methods, at least it could be accounted for. It was not opaque. At that point of time, it was non-transparent. Bonds were through checks or online. Earlier system, non-transparent. This was through checks, online. It eliminated cash from the system. Now, when you do this, you also have to protect the identity of the donor, because the people said, well, if other political parties find out that I have donated to them, then it will become a problem for me. So they were considered reforms then. We have to understand that. It was legislated in the House. Arun Jaitley, then Finance Minister, brought it. So it's a very important thing what was happening. So once again, the cash will reign supreme in the system till the government gets another system in place. Supreme Court found it unconstitutional. Now, there is right now no alternative system in the place. No alternative system. So how does reform of elections happen? How does India reform electoral funding? That's the moot question. This came as a reform. It goes out because of a law, which Supreme Court said, well, it violates right to information. Now, late Arun Jaitley supported electoral bonds. He was a finance minister. And he said that this is the way to regulate it. And let me take out a quote from the article he wrote. He said the government is willing to consider all suggestions to further strengthen the cleansing of political funding in India. It has to be borne in mind that the impractical suggestions will not improve the cash denominated system, they would only consolidate it. So it's a wide debate. What happens to the electoral reforms? What happens to those who had already given money, thinking that their names will never come out? It's another question. And lastly, what the government will do? Government is expected to file a petition on the decision. But I'm setting that aside right now, because Finance Ministry and Law Ministry may hold discussion to review the decision also. But the larger issue is, what about those who had already given the money thinking that their names will not come out? That's one. And secondly, how do we reform funding in this country? And secondly, the whole idea was to have a cashless thing. Let's dip into a couple of important bites, and then I'll be joined by guest Suresh Chandra, former Law Secretary, Jagdeep Chokar, Petitioner Electoral Bonds, Founder Member and Trustee ADR, and subsequently Dr. S.Y. Qureshi, former Chief Election Commissioner of India. But let me play those bites out for you first.
The question is whether this court should only strike down the non-disclosure provision in the electoral bond scheme, that is clause 7.4. The anonymity of the contributor is intrinsic to the electoral bond scheme, The electoral bond scheme is not distinguishable from other modes of contributions through banking channels such as checks, transfer through the electronic clearing system, or direct debit if the anonymity component of the stream is struck down. Thus, the electoral bond scheme 2018 will have to be struck down as unconstitutional.
Term effect on our electoral democracy, the Supreme Court has struck down the electoral bond scheme, comprehensively struck it down, and all the provisions that were made to bring it into effect in the Income Tax Act, in the Companies Act, etc., everything has been struck down. They have held that this violates the fundamental right to information of citizens to know about who is contributing this much money to political parties, etc. They have also struck down the amendment made which allowed unlimited political contribution being made by companies to political parties. So, not only the electoral bond scheme, but also the amendment which removed the restrictions on political contributions by companies, which were that you cannot contribute more than 7.5% of your annual profit by way of political contributions. That has also been struck down as violating the level playing field in a democracy. So the petitions filed by us have been comprehensively allowed by the Supreme Court.
So Prashant Bhushan, obviously there are two views on this subject. Those who felt that these are reforms which are required, and the court now has pronounced it unconstitutional. Suresh Chandra, former law secretary, joins me. So thank you very much for joining me on my show On Point. My first question to you is, sir, what happens to those who have already given money? Because they gave the money thinking that they were they're covered under a law and their names will not be disclosed. Now this is happening retrospectively, sir.
First thing is, we have the law that the anything which has been declared or which has been laid down by the Supreme Court, it is prospective. And second thing is, the accrued rights cannot be taken away. These are the important things. Giving retrospective effect to this in itself will be unconstitutional. Now, we have to understand, if you want to go further into this, you have to understand the thinking. What was the reason to bring this law? That is to curb the black money. And right from 1956 law to 1969, again it was banned, 1985, and then again 2017. I think there was a effort to bring transparency. The only thing which was there, the amount will be declared, it will be shown by the companies. The political parties will also be, bringing all those contributions in their accounts and making it public. So transparency was there. Now, if I look into Kartikeya ji, then there is one Constitution Bench judgment of K.S. Puttaswamy versus Union of India.
Correct, sir.
That judgment very categorically has said that all these statutory rights, including the right of disclosure, right to information, are subordinate to the fundamental rights which are enshrined under Article 21 of the Constitution. So if you look into this, and if the companies or the parties who are donating through the electoral bonds, if it was made transparent as it is argued, then it goes against their own judgment of the Constitution Bench in K.S. Puttaswamy.
Okay.
So
But Mr. Chandra, you made this point. But I have a larger question. So what happens to the electoral reforms? Electoral reforms actually stand on this idea that the funding has to be mainstreamed. Now, in absence of this, what happens, sir? Because, again, we have Lok Sabha elections, sir, in next 2 months, 60 days. No bonds will be issued, which means that there will be cash in the economy, which means that the truckloads of cash will move. Now, court, no one is here to question the court. Court has given a judgment. It found it unconstitutional. I am taking this conversation further, sir. Now, how do you deal with this black money which is floating around in cash?
That is the challenge for the government. Frankly speaking, this will have to be, strategy has to be devised by those who are in the government or in the political parties. But here we are discussing the legal issues which have cropped up because of this. Our understanding was that it will curb black money through electoral bonds. It is not that only the electoral bonds are only the means. Cash is there, check is there, online transactions are also there according with the cap 7.5% of the total this. I have yet to read this judgment whole as to what if they have simply stuck down the electoral bonds, then one channel has been blocked, while other channels like cash, like online, like this will remain if they have simply stuck down the electoral bond scheme. Again, I will say, if you go through the statement and objection reasons and the press note which was published by the then Finance Minister, Mr. Arun Jaitley, he has made it just to bring transparency and to curb black money. And he has not only said that other channels will also be there. These channels were also available earlier, but the companies were not coming forward, and the funding from the industrial houses, from these business houses was not coming forth because, again, they were identifiable. Their privacy was likely to be jeopardized, and if other party,
but
is
Mr.
not
Chandra,
favorable,
there's a word in Hindi, you would know, it's called vyavaharikta. कौन अपना पैसा देगा? He'll feel that the other political party will gun. Suppose you want to give money legally in thousands of crore, would you like to reveal yourself? He will feel that the other political party will say बहुत पैसा दे दिया, what about us? Or he gets the worst of it in case that party to whom he has funded does not come to power. That is also an issue.
Exactly. These were some of the practical difficulties. By keeping all these factors into account, the electoral bonds were brought into, and it is a complete, during that period, when I was the information commissioner, these facts also, this case also came before me. However, before I could finally give the verdict, my term, completed, so I could not give it. But I don't see any reason why the privacy of the companies should not be maintained. This is something. Now, this is raising two very important issues apart from these practical difficulties.
Okay.
One is the separation of power.
Okay.
And second is the right to privacy, which is the fundamental right, wherein the Constitution bench has said that it is over and above all these disclosures and all this. Second thing, the power of judicial review, with due respect, is when you are violating certain core basic structure or core fundamental rights or some constitutional provisions.
Correct.
This was through a legally enacted laws, and now the laws, to some extent, these have been struck down. Now, again, if they do not succeed in the judicial review, again they will file the review.
Okay.
Then maybe the questions you are raising the government has to think, because it is also raising certain
So I'm falling
issues.
short. I'm falling short of time, but you have made a very important point.
Separation-
Very
yes,
important point.
separation of power.
Separation of power is a very important point you are raising. But I also say that what about the retrospective declaration? Because you see, people were told that the names will not be disclosed, and now the names are going to be disclosed. And I think this is going to be questioned. This will be a point of debate as to what's going to happen to those who had been told that the names are not going to come out. Thank you so much, sir, for joining me in this debate. It's time for a short break, but before you go, let me tell you, we are counting down to News9's mega global summit. What India thinks today. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will deliver the keynote address at the summit. The theme of the summit this year is how India is poised for the next big leap on the global stage. Stay tuned to watch this TV9 network initiative on Feb 25th and 26th.
From fragile 5 to top 5, from a laggard to a leader, India under Modi has reimagined the world order. Presenting the second edition of TV9, What India Thinks Today. Summit theme, India poised for the next big leap. Listen to Prime Minister Modi unveil his vision for Viksit Bharat at News9 Global Summit, a TV9 network initiative.
So it's a big debate. And the debate is, now what happens to the funding process? One, right to information, the issues of privacy, its non-application to the contribution, the court has ruled. It says it's unconstitutional. It says there's a problem in context of participatory democracy which this law creates, and it creates conflict of interest. People who give money, huge sums of money anonymously, can influence policy. But then, how do you clean black money? One. What about the black money? Second. What about those who had given money? Names disclosed. And third, is there an alternative system in place? Is it a case of judicial overreach? All that we'll talk about it, because I'll be joined by Jagdeep Chokar, petitioner on Electoral Bonds, founder, member and trustee ADR, who will give us a very different perspective on this issue. But before that, let me play out two important bites.
Choreographed to enrich the BJP, because everybody knew that the BJP was in power and that any donations through electoral bond scheme would come to the BJP. But the interesting part is that this electoral bond scheme had nothing to do with elections. It was really the bonding between the corporate sector and the BJP, which received the largest number of donations. And the donations they received over the years amounts to about 5,000 to 6,000 crores. Now, with 5,000 to 6,000 crores in your kitty, which is not to be used in elections at all, right? You can topple governments, you can build your infrastructure as a political party, you can build the infrastructure for the RSS, you can set up your communication network throughout the country, and you can do what you like, and there's no accountability. So I think to that extent it's something that's significant has happened in terms of the future of our country.
जिन्होंने इलेक्ट्रल बॉन्ड्स को एक्सेप्ट नहीं किया, आज तक एक भी इलेक्ट्रल बॉन्ड को एक्सेप्ट नहीं किया, और हमारी उसूल है, हमारा मानना है कि ये इलेक्ट्रल बॉन्ड स्कीम ये राजनीतिक करप्शन, पॉलिटिकल करप्शन का लीगलाइजेशन, तो इसके खिलाफ हम खड़े रहे हैं, और उसीलिए तो सुप्रीम कोर्ट हमें सुनने के लिए तैयार था। उन्होंने कहा कि कोई पॉलिटिकल पार्टी उसको वो सुनने के लिए तैयार नहीं था, क्योंकि बाकी सब ले चुके हैं। तो हमारी स्टेटस और काउंसिल लोकस स्टैंड है, ये उनका इनिशियल जजमेंट था। लेकिन आज ये जजमेंट जो आया, इसका हम स्वागत करते हैं। हम समझते हैं कि जिस तरीके से देश के अंदर राजनीतिक भ्रष्टाचार को कानूनी दर्जा दिया गया, ये एक बहुत ही गंभीर बात है। और जो दावा करके आते हैं कि भ्रष्टाचार के खिलाफ है, ना खाएंगे ना खाने देंगे, वही जो है इस तरीके से कानूनी व्यवस्था जो है बना चुके हैं इस राजनीतिक भ्रष्टाचार के लिए। तो इसके विरोध में हम रहे हैं और ये भी स्वागत है इस बात का भी, क्योंकि आज बताया गया कि मार्च तक ये स्पष्टीकरण आनी चाहिए कौन है जिन्होंने ये पैसा और दिया किसको। और उसके साथ साथ एक शब्द का इस्तेमाल किया ये वर्डिक्ट में, वो क्विड प्रो को, यानी पैसे दिए जा रहे हैं उसके उल्टा कुछ प्राप्त करने सरकार से। अगर ये खुलासा जरूरी है देश को अगर भ्रष्टाचार के ऊपर अंकुश लगाने के लिए, हम चाहेंगे कि ये आगे बढ़े ये बात।
Judgment is of a constitution bench running into hundreds of pages. It requires a comprehensive study and thereafter a structured reply. तो ये आपसे हम बहुत विनम्रता से कहना चाहेंगे कि जो सुप्रीम कोर्ट के संवैधानिक पीठ का ये फैसला है, अतः पार्टी की ओर से और संभवतः सरकार की ओर से आवश्यकता पड़ेगी तो इसका सुविचारित टिप्पणी की जाएगी। आज जब मैं पार्टी के राष्ट्रीय मंच पर बैठा हूं तो कुछ बातें हम कहना चाहते हैं। ये निर्णय एक बहुत ही प्रामाणिक उद्देश्य के लिए लाया गया था। दिस डिसीजन वॉज अंडरटेकन फॉर ए वेरी लॉडेबल ऑब्जेक्टिव टू ब्रिंग इन ट्रांसपेरेंसी इन इलेक्टोरल फंडिंग।
ये एक तूफान है, एक भूकंप है, क्योंकि ये साबित कर दिया है सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने कि मोदी सरकार सूट बूट झूठ और लूट की सरकार है। ये जो इलेक्टोरल बॉन्ड स्कीम लाया गया था ये गैर कानूनी है और ये हमारे संविधान के खिलाफ है। और इससे ये भी साबित होता है कि मोदी सरकार एक तरफ चंदादाताओं को सम्मान देती है और दूसरी तरफ अन्नदाताओं पर अत्याचार और अन्याय करती है। नहीं, ये बातचीत चल रही है, अलग अलग पार्टियों की अलग अलग मजबूरियां होती हैं, पर मुझे पूरा विश्वास है क्योंकि नेशनल कॉन्फ्रेंस, पीडीपी सभी इंडिया गठबंधन के हिस्से रहे हैं और हिस्से जरूर रहेंगे।
Now let me show you a graphic on the full frame. This graphic will tell you and give you a sense of what the funding is. This is the funding income of political parties 2004-5 to 2014-15. In this funding, you can see the crores that have come from known sources above 20,000. Congress got 400.32 and the Bharatiya Janata Party got 917.86. This is in crores of money. From other known sources, 258.38 crores and 228.86 crores. From unknown sources below 20,000, 400 crores Congress party got and 917.86 crores. So the issue here is unknown sources are contributing as much as known sources. Mr. Chandra, are you there with me?
Yes.
So, unknown sources are contributing as much as the known sources. So, there is a volume of this black money which is circulating.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
How do you get 400 crores or 398 crores, that volume of money, and everyone is paying you 19,990 rupees? Everyone is paying you 19,999 rupees. How is that possible? Isn't it, sir? Isn't that the elephant in the room? Please.
In fact, see, we are only considering this, legality of this.
There's a data, sir. It's fact.
Data is always there. But if you see the scheme, the electoral bond scheme, which has been struck down, and as per your reading, because I could not go through the whole judgment, which requires further study, I am of the view that once you are even disclosing the names of those against the then law, then the other parties who will be adversely affected were never heard. And the order which is going against them it is a sufficient ground to challenge on that ground by them, because this judgment will then be a judgment without hearing, against the principles of natural justice. I don't know. We have yet to see this, the prospectivity, and also there appears to be, something which has been considered by the Supreme Court, is the one-sided of the story. Pragmatic approach will have to be seen by balancing the other factors, and at the same time seeing as to whether this effort will strengthen the political process with strengthening the funding, whether that will be transparent, and whether it will curb the black money.
But Mr. Chandra, anyone who has covered elections, anyone who has covered election knows that the money moves around. That's the fact. वो बोरों में भी चलता है, सूटकेस पे भी होता है, गाड़ी की डिक्की में भी होता है, वो हर जगह होता है. I have also seen it in 25 years of my career. Issue is that how do you funnel this money legally through the banking system so that this black money and even fake money, people don't talk about it, the counterfeiting, it's also a big issue, can be taken care of. Because one thing which we are not taking any decision is electoral reforms. We talk about everything, sir, but we don't talk about the money reform. There are global examples. Globally, democracies like France, America, they have their systems in place. Why can't we have those systems in place here, sir?
Sir, you are right. I'm with you on this aspect. There is a process, and the process is sometimes something which is thought of, it becomes a thesis. After some time, you see that an opposite antithesis is developed, then again there is a synthesis. If you see from very beginning, there was no regulation
you are being Mr. Chandra, you are being very diplomatic with me. You are being very diplomatic with me on this issue. But I am very happy to announce that Dr. S.Y. Qureshi, former Chief Election Commissioner of India, joins me. So thank you so much for joining me and giving time on this show on point on the judgment of the Supreme Court on the electoral bonds. But I'll come to you after a short break. Please, both of you stay with me and we'll start our discussion. Thank you so much, sir.
Currently, the industry is facing a lot of challenges as far as demand is concerned. Basically, the US markets has slowed down because of high inflation.
So obviously, diamonds being a dream product, something which doesn't have a utility value or is seen as a luxury. So that obviously goes off your shopping list. That's the first item that will go off your shopping list, especially in recessionary trends.
That lab-grown diamonds are not mined, and they do away with the entire mining. So they save up on all the environmental damage that is associated with mining, and of course, the mining cost, which is why they're even more affordable.
People that is impacted by all these recessions are the artisans, are the people who work in this industry, right? But I think lab-grown diamond has allowed them to actually use their skills in the same product.
This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
जानना है तो देखिए, समझना है तो सुनिए, सीखना है तो पूछिए, और कमाना है तो खरीदिए। जानकारी, सलाह और निवेश सब एक ही सुपर ऐप पर। पैसे का सवाल है तो जवाब है Money9। आजादी पैसे की, अभी डाउनलोड करें।
How do you fulfill that promise? Because ultimately expectations have to be met. If you look at the political landscape, is it really changing for women? And what is the inability of the forces that dead bodies surface but not the living people?
It's probably the best kept secret in India.
Family-owned business, which has been extremely clinical in their approach. They have not hesitated ever to kill their darlings.
Typical to a South Indian business empire, I think they've shunned the limelight almost deliberately.
$20,000 people dead and counting. What's happening in the United States of America is unprecedented. You will have to pay for this.
Welcome back, and let me straight away go to Dr. S.Y. Qureshi, former Chief Election Commissioner of India. Sir, your opening comments on the judgment given by the Supreme Court of India on the bonds, sir.
A great judgment, a milestone in India's democracy, fantastic judgment for India's democracy.
So, how does this judgment strengthen democracy?
Well, the democracy requires transparency. In fact, I would like you to recall the speech of the finance minister, the budget speech in which he introduced the scheme. He himself said, he made three sentences. First was that without transparency of political funding, free and fair elections are not possible. A statement of the finance minister. The second statement that for the last 70 years we have failed to achieve that transparency. Now, what did you expect? In the third sentence, he will say, now I am introducing transparency. And what he did was exactly the opposite. Whatever transparency existed then was taken away. And what was the transparency available at that time? That any donation of more than 20,000 rupees, 20,000, was reported to the Election Commission. Election Commission certified the receipt of this information. On the basis of that certificate, the donor would get income tax rebate. Right. Now, after that was taken away, and now even 2 crore, 20 crore, 200 crore, 2,000 crores, nothing will be known to anybody. Is that transparency which was which was being sought to be achieved?
But Mr. Qureshi, a lot of people would say that when people want to contribute to political parties, let me be the devil's advocate, sir. If their identity is known, that the other political party can get back to them. Then why didn't you give me that much of money? So as you know, so someone you have handled India's elections, how do you deal with this human behavior in which you can be pulled up for not giving that money for your preference, for your choice?
Well, the Karthikeya, for the last 70 years, we have been running elections, and people have been donating to political parties. In 70 years, nobody complained. Nobody complained of reprisal. These donors were donating to all parties. These parties were winning and losing all the time. And there was no reprisal reported any time. So therefore, suddenly the donor wanting secrecy was the defense. And why did they suddenly want secrecy? Because our contention is that they wanted secrecy to hide the quid pro quo. What were the benefits they are going to get in return? This is one. Secondly, as I've mentioned in many TV appearances and in articles, there is a totally different alternative. Why has that not been discussed? If it is such an important national issue, set up a national election fund where anybody will donate without any fear of reprisal, no question of secrecy. You donate 100 crores to that fund. From that fund, the fund will be allocated to the political parties depending on the votes they get, based on their political performance. This is the most transparent system possible. It has been mentioned again and again. It has not been considered. Why? That is the question I would like to ask.
So you are saying that for partisan reasons, the most transparent system hangs in fire today.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know, what was your question, Karthikeya?
I said, you're basically saying for the partisan reason, political reason, a reform has not taken place, because my whole idea was to today talk about what happens to the reform, because ultimately this bond system is related to the electoral reforms. That is the main story.
Exactly. Actually, there is a total lack of sincerity about it. If the government was and political parties were sincere about it, not just the ruling party now, over the years, we have been demanding these reforms for a long time, 20 years, 30 years. They would have considered it. Electoral fund, electoral trust has been mentioned. There are certain electoral trusts. Anybody donating to those trusts, no questions are asked. But the suggestion here is, which has been made repeatedly, that if a national election fund is created, so if you and I donate to that, there is no question of any reprisal, because that money becomes anonymous. From there, it will be given to to different political parties depending on their performance, electoral performance. I have always, people have been talking about public funding or state funding of elections, which I oppose, because the state funding of elections is difficult to monitor, but state funding of political parties based on the performance, on the votes they get. For instance, my formulation has been that if you get one vote, we give you 100 rupees, and multiply by whatever vote. Now, how many votes you get cannot be fight. This is the figure which is very accurate. On that basis, you get your money, and then there will be no beg, borrow, and steal. There will be no arm twisting. There will be no begging. The political party will be getting this money by check from the National Electoral Fund with dignity. Here, all kinds of the devious means are resorted to collect that money. Corruption, arm twisting, reprisal, all that will disappear when this solution is readily available. We have not heard a word from the government and political parties on this. Even if they don't agree, let them come out with their arguments. We'll confront them on this issue.
But sir, do you think that this can qualify as a case of judicial overreach? Because
not at all.
Not at all.
Not
Why?
at all. No, but not. This was referred to the Constitution, referred to the Supreme Court 6 years ago. If at all, I would say that this qualifies for judicial indifference to a national issue of great importance. I have very often said, and many people have said, that the corruption during election is the mother of all corruption in the country. Yes. Why? Because when you spend crores in the election, you have to collect crores, and how you collect those crores, that is where the problem begins. Therefore, an issue of such a national importance, which was brought before the Supreme Court 6 years ago, why did the Supreme Court not decide it within the 3 months, 6 months, 1 year? They took 6 years, but thank God they finally did and gave a good judgment. But therefore, to say judicial overreach, what else is Supreme Court job? It's the Constitution bench and unanimous decision.
But if you look at the, isn't it poignant? I would say it's tragic. There is no national electoral fund. But then now you revert back to the system where there is now cash all over the place.
Yeah, no. But the Supreme Court itself has said that you wanted transparency. The only thing which electoral bonds introduced was that donations will be made by check through the banking procedure. Fair enough. What they could have done, that who gives how much to whom should be made public. All that we wanted, this was a 30-second solution. If the government had done that, the case would have disappeared. The objection was to the secrecy. All right, instead of collecting cash, which was an issue because almost 70% of the donations to the political parties were reported by cash. So there was no transparency there. So, all right, let it be through the banking, through online, through check, but then who gives how much to whom? This should not be kept a secret. That is not acceptable at all.
Okay, before I
which
let
is
go,
which is what the court has said very clearly.
Okay, before I let go of you, sir, before I let go of you, but now the names of the people will be put out in public who funded political parties thinking that their names will remain anonymous. Is that a legal issue?
No. Well, this is a question which has been asked, but you have heard so many times that actually the entire transaction was not really secret. It was known to the State Bank of India, and State Bank is a public sector bank. Therefore, it was known to the government. So only the government knew. The opposition, the public, the media, nobody else knew. So therefore, where was the secrecy? And if there was any reprisal, it would have already happened, because the government would have known that if some opposition party has been funded by an ex-corporate, the corporate would have been investigated by those investigative agencies of various kinds. So to say that now they have been exposed, that's wrong. They were already exposed to the government.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, Dr. Qureshi, for joining me. And the issue which we are discussing here is reforms. I am very happy that I am joined by Jagdeep Chokar, parishioner, founder member and trustee of ADR, an organization which tells you how, where and when the money is spent. The data and graphics, every journalist would know about that. Thank you, Mr. Chokar, for joining me. Your opening comments on the judgment. Previously, I was speaking with Dr. Qureshi and I had asked him, what about the donors? Their names will be in the public domain now.
So name should be in the public domain. Why should the name not be in the public domain? Political parties are public institutions. They work for public causes, as they themselves say. And if for doing their work for public, they need money, public should give them money. And when public gives them money for public causes, what is there to hide?
Well put, sir. Very well put, sir. But then when this scheme came out, Mr. Chokar, it came out as part of an electoral reform. Court says it's unconstitutional, infringes on right to privacy. It says that it harms the participatory democracy. It also says that the right of privacy does not apply on the contribution. It eats into right to information. On those, the law has been set aside. My point is, what happened to the reforms then? What sort of reforms are required for elections? Because ultimately, it was a scheme to reform the funding part of the election.
When it was introduced in the budget speech of the then
Mr. Jaitley,
now late finance minister,
yes,
in the budget speech, there were 2 paragraphs which talked about this. And the subheading for those 2 paragraphs was transparency in political funding. And in the afternoon of the same day, in a media interaction, the the finance minister said, the bonds will be, and I'm quoting him, the bonds will be in the nature of bearer bonds. The identity of the donor will be anonymous. End of quote. Since then, I have been asking people and writing that, please tell me or please show me a dictionary which says that anonymity and transparency are synonyms of each other. How can you have a transparent system which involves anonymity? This is the problem when we want to do something else and we say something else.
Okay.
So saying that we brought it for transparency is one thing, but the way the whole scheme operated was even more opaque than earlier, and with what the Solicitor General and the Attorney General said in the court, it is not selective transparency, it is selective disclosure. I mean, what is the difference? It is disclosed only to the ruling party. It is not disclosed to anybody else. How do you call that transparency? By what standard? I don't understand.
Okay, Mr. Choka, can you please take my viewers through? Then how can you take my viewers through this question? How do the Indian electoral system resolve this issue of unknown contributor? 20,000.
I will tell you. I
Okay.
will tell you.
Please.
I will tell you. It is very simple. There is no rocket science. When demonetization was introduced, do you remember that we were told, we the citizens of the country were told, that we should do all payment through digital means? And at that time, we were told that even if you want to pay 10 rupees to a rickshawala or to a vegetable vendor, we should pay it through Paytm.
Correct.
Paytm, just a minute. Paytm is of course gone, but there are other UPI-based systems which are available. We make the smallest of payment electronically. So why can't people pay money to political parties electronically? Why should political parties have a special provision that they can accept up to 2,000 rupees in cash? Why should they not accept even 10 rupees by UPI? That is the way the reform should be brought in. But the political parties as well as the corporates do not want transparency. And I will tell you why they don't want transparency. I was in a TV discussion with a politician and with a corporate person, and both of them said that we want to give money in check, they don't want to accept it by check. I said, both of you can't be right. Then subsequent reflection, it dawned on me, give me a minute to explain this to you.
No, absolutely, please go ahead, sir. Please go ahead.
If you are a politician and I am a business person, actually I should put it the other way. Anyway, A politician and B business person, they agree that the business person will pay 100 crores to A. And let us say if there is a check, 100 crores get transferred, if there is an electronic transfer, 100% gets transferred. But if there is a cash transaction, the business person will not go himself or herself with 100 crores. He will send or she will send one of his representatives with the cash. Now this representative of the business person who goes to the political party, he or she does not go to the head of the political party, not even to the treasurer. He goes to a lower level person to hand over the cash. So the business person's representative says, "Oh, Seth ji ne to sirf 90 crore रुपया भेजा है, 100 crore नहीं भेजा." And because there is no accountant, there is no receipt, so the political party rep says, "All right, we will take 90 crores." And the political party rep goes to his boss and he says, "Sir, the business fellow has sent only 80 crores. So let us accept 80 crores. The point I am making is, if the transfer of money is in cash, there is what is called an individual versus an organizational issue. Individuals pocket a part of the money and political parties get the rest of the money. This is also what in part explains why a person who contests an election, even if he loses the election, his wealth increases much more than the average person's wealth. And if a person happens to become an MLA or an MP, his wealth increases by 5 or 10 times. And if the person happens to become a minister, of course, there is no end to how the wealth increases.
Okay, so there is a question. So, Mr. Chokar, you answer this question also with what you are saying. But a lot of people say that, if we fund money, there will be pressure from other political parties, we will have to pay a price for it. Suppose they lose the election, the party have fund, and the other guy comes in and says, "Humko to nahi diya tha."
देखिए ऐसा है, when people pay money to political parties, if anybody wants to tell me they pay it because they believe in the principles and ideology of political parties, I will excuse myself. People pay money to political parties because they want some job done. and they pay it to the party who can get their job done. Big business people as a form of insurance or paid to all political parties. That you never know kaun kab satta mein aa jaye. So this is a business which goes on, and this arguments that are being given that one is scared of an opposition party or the party in power harassing him, all these people who give money are in cahoots with the political parties, with all political parties. And if you are giving money, please let us know whom are you giving it to, or who is receiving, they should let us know. As citizens, the Supreme Court has said, and I don't have to substantiate that citizens have a right to know how and where do political parties get their money from. I mean, that is the law of the land.
You think that, before I let go of you, sir, now, there is no alternate system in place. There is no alternate system in place, sir. So are we reverting back to the old system?
We are reverting back to the old system because this new system had made matters worse.
Okay.
Therefore, we are reverting back to the old system, and we will continue to work to improve the old system. By the way, this thing came in 2017. We have been working on this issue since 1999. I am not saying that the earlier system was, etched in stone and was doodh ka dhula hua. I am saying the earlier system was bad. But this electoral bond scheme made the system worse than earlier because it gave unfair advantage to one or more political parties, and it prevented citizens from knowing where is that money coming from. This was a additional mischief introduced into the system, which has now been removed. We can now go back and work on the existing system and make it better. And if you want to make it better, let the government introduce, or let all political parties introduce digital payments, and that'll be the end of the story.
I think that's very well said. Thank you so much, Mr. Choka, for joining me. On this issue, three things are very clear. One, that majority opinion is that this was corroding Indian democracy. But the counterpoint is that it also means that, the existing system comes back, which means a lot of cash which is in circulation. But what is really required is electoral reform and the issue of funding which plagues the economy. Transparency is required, but what about the issue of retribution? Yes, names need to be disclosed because the government already knew them, but is it correct that these names would be put out in public domain? Jury is out. A lot of legal opinion is that, this might be retrospective, might not work. The government is going to go to the court, but the courts have argued it's unconstitutional because right to privacy in context of contribution does not apply. It also says encroaches on the right to information, and the quid pro quo which anonymity creates in context of money being donated and the policy being made, it has a corrosive effect on Indian democracy. So before I tune out, before I end my show, I'm leaving you with two important bites because political parties have different views on it. But the fact of the matter is it's not going to end here. The government is going to go to the court, and it's a larger vexed issue because Lok Sabha elections are merely 60 days away. So it involves corporates, it involves political parties, it involves funding. So it's not a small matter. Supreme Court has taken a momentous, I would say a huge decision which will require cooperation by political parties, because the idea was to reform funding of the elections. So the decision will stay. But how do we reform the election? That's funding, which is the Gangotri of corruption in Indian politics, is a question which every political party will need to answer.
The Supreme Court decision should be welcomed by all right-thinking people who believe in probity in public life. Political financing and electoral campaign financing are the two big elephants in the room for every democracy. And this electoral bond scheme was an opaque instrumentality which completely and absolutely debarred the access
of ordinary citizens from knowing as to how political parties and electoral campaigns are being funded. So therefore, the Supreme Court decision, which essentially directs the State Bank of India, which is the operator of the Electoral Bond scheme, to provide all the data to the Supreme Court, to the Election Commission, and the Election Commission to publish it on its website, is a welcome decision. I do hope that the government...
Decision of the history of India. I think we fully salute them for their brave decision. I think country needs such type of change. It is not for it to save democracy and to save all of them. I think they have taken a bold decision. I think I'm sure that even they will go even to the grassroots level, to even including the voter level. Voter level has to be such type of decisions to be gone to the voter level. There was some decision from session at point of time when it was election commission. Now I am sure Supreme Court will take a decision to see that this type of misusing the offices will stop.
There's a new video around what deepfake can do.
We have seen a trailer of this a few days back.
Rollers should not be only on the platform.
We'll have to wait and see how those play out.
Hindenburg's report cannot be taken as gospel of truth.
वर्ष 2070 तक भारत नेट जीरो का लक्ष्य हासिल करेगा.
There is certainly a wall of capital coming into the clean tech, climate tech space, not just in India but across the world.
This and more, streaming on world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
A defiant performance by